Welcome back. You're now watching the lifestyle segment on the weekend show brought to you by Holo Crunch Popcorn. My name is Andy Madaki. Joining us today, we have Amidat Abdul Salam, a gender justice and human rights advocate on the lifestyle segment. Good morning and welcome to the weekend show.
Thank you for having me.
Also with us, we have Hassanat Maina, Executive Director, ASVIOL Support Initiative. Good morning and welcome to the
Good
weekend
morning.
show.
Thank you for having me.
The Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act was passed on May 28, 2015. However, it was signed into law on May 28, 2015. However, it had been approved by the National Assembly since 2013. Years down the line, we now have a submission in the Senate by Jibrin Issa from Kogi State, who is asking for this to be repealed. He has his arguments, whereas civil society and even some government agencies have stated that this is the one bill that protects vulnerable people, protects women, children, and also men. Why are they seeking to repeal this as opposed to actually trying to make amendments? How does this play out for the rest of Nigerians, for vulnerable people, and also for cases currently being prosecuted? And that's the conversation we will be having. Quite an interesting development, and I heard both of you having a conversation earlier. Why do you think they're pushing for a repeal and not an amendment? Or what's your thoughts generally? Let's start with that, around this new proposal for this to be for this law to be repealed. And I'll start with you.
My thought generally will be that it is not people-centered, but as for what the reason is, I can't really say. I'm not in the senator's mind. But what is quite evident is the fact that it is very opaque, very secretive. We didn't hear about it until it passed the second reading. So this has raised a lot of questions among Nigerians, concerned Nigerians, youth group, activists. What is really going on? Why is a repeal happening in secret? What happened to the NGOs, CSOs that were key stakeholders to the passing of this bill in the first place? Where are they when a critical decision is to be made regarding this bill? So these are the questions that are going on, and this is why Nigerians are also rising up to ask these questions, the valuable questions, and also to push for amendments of the bill and not a repeal, because it seems like the wrong thing right now to repeal the bill. The progress made so far cannot just be thrown away or thrown under the gutter. We need to strengthen the framework we already have and push for an amendment, because they had said that he had some drafting issues from the National Assembly and all of that. But if that is the case, if it is truly people-centered and our goal is the same, which is to prioritize the victims and the people, then we should look towards strengthening this framework instead of repealing it and just totally cancelling it from the legal system.
What are your thoughts?
I think I'm going to align my thoughts with hers, but just that the bill says a bill to repeal and enact. And mostly they say civil society is very combative, but I think rightly so, because when you look at how the bill was even proposed, it had passed through first reading and second reading. Naturally, we get to hear about these things. But like she said, it seemed like it was done in secret. And of course, it would raise suspicion. And she earlier said that she might not be able to speak about the intent of the senator. But as a lawyer, I know that intention is very key when you go through the minds of legislative draftsmen. And I think I'm going to base this on the news report from Vanguard. And it seemed to me like it was sort of like, the Twitter gender wars. And I wonder if that's what we elect our representatives to go do in the Senate House. Because the senator was opining about issues around, this bill only focuses on women. And then he said something offensive about those people that pushed for the bill, those people that tirelessly pushed for the bill. My colleague's hands was beaten by the police in Sokoto because she was trying to push for the bill. When I coordinated the standstill rally, we had lots of issues. And also our mothers that had pushed for it since 2002. And he said, these women or these people were just trying to sneak in something, as if violence against women itself is not a big issue that should caused sleepless nights to legislators. And so the whole premise of it, is very questionable. However, now it's in public opinion stage, public reading. I think it's very important for all civil society, and I'm so grateful for this conversation, so that people would be able to read, and opine and have opinions on these things and see how we can strengthen it. When I went through the proposed enactment that the senator was proposing, I think it's pretty interesting, because even consent, was defined and it was stratified to mean, because sometimes when we talk about consent, largely the conversations that we have is, oh, but what about when consent have gray areas? And I think the one that he's proposing has defined that even when consent is obtained by fraud or, through other means, it is still not consent, hence, you'll still be punished for rape. And I think that's a brilliant, brilliant addition. Because even we that have pushed for the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act, we know that it's not perfect. We know that it was rushed. We know that there's a lot of work that needs to be done. However, like she said, when work needs to be done, it needs everybody, and it needs everybody in a way that people would come together and be able to contribute to it. Not when you're on the state Senate and then, you're asserting things like, oh, they were trying to sneak in things, and then it seems like a gender war, and you're saying this not even looking at the statistics about the violence against women in Kogi, where you represent. So these are issues, that we must ask. And honestly, I'm really grateful that civil society are extremely suspicious of this government and even government in general, because they haven't given us anything, to trust them. It always seems like they're very sneaky with the way they do their things. So I love that we're asking the right questions and we're having this conversation.
I find it quite suspicious as well. And you spoke about how opaque it gets with the legislators. I specifically mentioned the date it was signed into law. Goodluck Jonathan, former president, was leaving office the next day. And on the 28th of May, a bill that had been passed 2 years prior got signed, along with several other bills, such as the Cybercrime Prevention Act. And so they signed close to 30 bills or 20 bills within about 15 minutes because they were leaving the next day, which is why we have the issues which we are having right now. And this now brings the limelight to the legislative of government. This happened in 2015. Now we have it again where, like the Cybercrime Act, same Cybercrime Act, was amended this year. No public hearing that was actually publicized for people to come for, even though they were alleged that this has been done. And the cybercrime levy was put in. You now also have the fact that this is going on with the same National Assembly that has refused to pass a gender and equal opportunities bill because some people say this will make women proud. And these are people elected to represent the people. Some people have said this would affect land ownership and inheritance. However, we've also seen a senator who was captured live on video assaulting someone in Abuja here, and all we got was an apology of sorts and nothing did happen. How do you think is a better process for the Senate to carry out such amendments as opposed to us just waking up and finding out it's already been sent to the Judiciary Committee and Constitutional Amendment?
Firstly, I need to say kudos to Nigerians for raising their voice at this critical time. Because across social media, I think a good number of people have been leveraging their social media platforms to ask the relevant questions. And it's just to put it out there that we need to keep asking these relevant questions. Like we earlier said, if it took 14 years of struggle, of relentless struggle and a hard-won fight to get this law passed in the first place, the key stakeholders to these passing, it's only logical that they are carried along. It is only logical that they are in the room where we discuss these things. Then if you look at it closely, it's like this should not be the next step of action, not a repeal at this point. At best, an amendment. And not just any amendment. An amendment that is carrying along CSOs, pro-rights groups, NGOs, key stakeholders. We have to come together because we are working to serve the people. The governments are also working to serve the people. The only difference is that we are doing it in different ways. So in critical things, we are even more closer to the people. We understand them better. We know their vulnerabilities. We are mostly their voice. So it is only fair that in situations like this, our valuable inputs matter. So it's supposed to be a public thing. Nothing about the VAPP was ever private. If it took 12 years to get, or 14 years rather, to get it passed, and now 9 years down the line, most of the people that are even still recording progress or implementations are still NGOs and CSOs. Only little efforts from the government. So it's only fair that they bring these parties in to have these conversations, then we know the best way to go about it. In the Vanguard news, they said it's a drafting problem, some loopholes here and there. Okay, great, bring us together. Let's redraft. Let's see if all of these things are aligning with our international human rights agreements. Let's make sure that we are not putting anything out there that will be a regression to human rights or to gender equality in Nigeria. There's already a huge gap in that aspect. So the least they can do is bring in every critical stakeholder together to address this issue, not just a one-man thing standing on the basis of, oh, it was brought in as a women law, then later it became gender neutral. I read that in the Vanguard news. I was like, okay, is this the basis of arguments here? But then it has to be inclusive. You cannot neglect key stakeholders and expect that we'll just keep quiet and watch everybody's efforts all these years go down the drain. I mean, it is 9 years after the passing of the bill, and we are still at this minimal level of implementation. We are not even there yet. We are nowhere close to where we are supposed to be. So taking us back to square one is surely not the solution. So we have to just come together, bring everybody together, make sure that their inputs are just, aligned with every other thing that they are doing.
I do agree with you. Hassan, when she mentions stakeholders, it's also quite laughable in Nigeria that it feels like the government, the stakeholders are not speaking to themselves. And let's say the government stakeholders. I say this because NAPTIP, the National Agency for Prohibition of Trafficking in Persons, had sent out a position paper on this a month ago. And that's because NAPTIP has used this legislator to prosecute so many perpetrators of this violence. I know in the last 2-3 years, they've ramped up about 75% of their prosecutions compared to where we've been for the last 15-20 years. Interestingly, and the reason why I say government is like they don't speak to themselves. I saw a new set of appointments where the DG of NAPTIP was removed and a new set of people were appointed in several positions. But to my understanding, NAPTIP has now been moved under justice. But those changes were made under humanitarian ministry. And so it now makes you ask, are they speaking to themselves? There was a video yesterday online of the Minister of Women Affairs who went to disrupt an event for reasons best known to her. And in her defense, whatever she's doing is best known to her. But these are the issues we should be talking about. As a Minister of Women Affairs, this affects women. With what NAPTIP is doing, this affects the progress which they've made and it's making them regress. With the National Assembly, so even without bringing in CSOs, NGOs, and the fighters like you people, this is still ongoing. And talking about his intention or things he has stated, he mentioned gender bias, that initially it was focused on protecting women. Mm-hmm. But the Act has gender neutral language and it also supports the defense of the rights of men. Mm-hmm. He mentioned the drafting issues. Drafting issues is the National Assembly. They're the ones who passed it and got it signed. They would have just done that amendment. He also mentioned inadequate punishments. That may be, I do understand that we can do better when it comes to the punishments. But he's also mentioned definition of rape, victim compensation, jurisdiction, and outdated reference. Is this enough to repeal this? But back to stakeholders, what do you think government on its own should do? Because they're shooting themselves in the foot with this repeal.
I absolutely agree with everything that you said. But when we look at our ministry, especially that of Women Affairs, we must bury our heads in shame to what it has been reduced to. Because when I watched the video of the minister, she said, and I quote her verbatim, that we do not need policies. And then she went on to start bringing populist ideas like we need to give women empowerment. And empowerment, in her words, we need to share food to women, we need to pay hospital bills, basically what the government should be doing. And here she is screaming at CSOs, screaming at donor agencies to be doing all of this. But I think what struck me the most is we do not need policies. And then it is no surprise why her voice is not heard in this conversation on the VAPP Act. It is no surprise why she's not pushing for these issues, because at the end of the day, she feels that women should be reduced to people that collect arms. And we all know, like we have tried it over and over and over again, arms does not push for development. If you want development, you must empower the people, and empower the people in different ways, especially through knowledge, especially through understanding of different policies that affects people. However, the minister begs to differ. And so we begin to ask, where do we move from here? What do we do from here? Because this is supposed to be the person that should be speaking for Nigerian women, that should be speaking for children. And then she went on to say things like, when it comes to provision of job, do you even need to convince people? Like her lack of understanding of our cultural and religious nuance that we have found ourselves in is pitiable. So when I look at all of these things, I feel scared. And I think rightfully, civil society should be extremely scared, because those that should be speaking and advocating and should be educating, because none of us know everything, but those that should be sending memos to say, excuse me, sir, this are our position on this, are attacking donor agencies. And now let's go back to the VAPP Act. She talked about implementation. We're nowhere near anywhere. But even when you talk about implementation, civil society have been asking donor agencies to push for the implementation of some of the provisions that are already even in the 2015 VAPP Act. And still, we're nowhere near anywhere. The 2015 VAPP Act provided for sexual assault referral centers. Where we have them in some states, they are not even functional. In fact, Lagos State, which has always been a pioneer in this kind of things, have just recently started to fund the Mirabel Center. It has not been in their state budget. There is a sexual assault referral center in Sokoto. And the last I heard of it was in the risks of, because the agreement was that government would take over and continue paying staff, and that didn't happen. Just this morning, I woke up to a colleague from university saying, you are a lawyer that works on women's rights, and, there's the case in my community. And I said, where is your community? He said, Benue. I'm in Abuja. So when you look at all of these issues, you realize that there's so much that we need to do, but people at the helm of affairs do not even understand it. And they don't understand it because, like our Minister of Women Affairs said in her famous words, we do not need policies. Now policies we go chop. So you begin to wonder, where do we move from here? So it is pitiable. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. And I think these are the questions that we need to be asking, especially people like Senator Jibrin. We need to ask him, so what is your contribution on the budget for women? Because right now we're even in a world where people are talking about gender budgeting. Where has Nigeria gone in that? What are the budgets that we have allocated for sexual assault referral centers? What are the budgets that we have for even mortality rates? And these are the questions that the Minister of Women Affairs should be asking. But she said, now policy we go chop. So
which is very sad, because I also remember, and this is now a bad pattern and trend, there was a case of some young students who had an allegation and a case to deal with, and instead they were being told to shut up, and they were being threatened to be sued. And this is meant to be the champion for female rights, and regardless of political affiliation or whatever, it's just unacceptable.
It is.
And the minister must do better, and if she can't, she should get the right people to do that. She's not a task force. She can't be jumping into events to shut them down. You've got tons of staff who can do that.
And just to add, I'm sorry, she is also, I think I saw a video of her being questioned by, legislators on corruption charges. So this is someone that you're not even, and then you go back and you're looking at how donors are spending their money, not your money. And instead of you to even see how you can diplomatically influence, things that you think are important, you go and you're throwing threats and tantrums. I hope someone sees her.
Let's talk about victims. We have Diri Dipre-Ibim, who is Head of Programs and Advocacy at Dorothy Njomanzi Foundation. Your foundation has, over the years, and I have followed this, fought for the rights of people who have been abused, victims of domestic violence. I think your founder had a case which was very well known about. We've had cases of young women in Nigeria being picked up on the road and being assaulted by law enforcement officers. You've had cases in Nigeria where you have a husband and wife get violent and physical, and you go to the police station and say, "Na family matter, we know they put mouth inside." How does this proposed repeal affect victims and survivors?
So it takes us years back. It does. One of the key things that we have been worried about is even, like Hassan has said, implementation of the VAPP Act is a problem. We're supposed to have specialized courts to handle cases of sexual and gender-based violence. And when you go to court, people are still charging cases with penal code. People are still saying they're using penal code. And the police is not even well informed about the VAPP Act. And saying that you're not, as opposed to amending it, you want to report, that doesn't make any sense to me. And I know that a lot of survivors, a lot of women and girls who are survivors like myself, yeah, who have had hope that with the VAPP Act I'm protected. I can go to NAPTIP, I can go to the police and hold them accountable and say this law exists and you have to use that law to get to fight for my rights. And when we are talking about the VAPP Act not being there anymore, how does that happen for them? Presently, when you go to the police station with cases, like you said, you're not wrong. You hear this is a family issue. We are even fighting with the police, with law enforcement, I would say, actually, not just the police, because even in NAPTIP, we're fighting what with law enforcement currently, and we're fighting over rights of survivors. In the VAPP Act, there's protection order that can be gotten for survivors. But I dare say that we've never been able to assess one for a survivor. And we've had survivors who need protection order. And as a matter of fact, one of the cases that we had where we had reported the case to NAPTIP, and the man came to the woman's house at night, like past 7 p.m., and he was banging on the door. And when she called us, we're not law enforcement, so there's only so much we can do. We can use the law to hold law enforcement accountable, but we cannot go and arrest someone on behalf of law enforcement. There's a place where the civil society can stop for the government to take over. And I remember that night calling the law enforcement officer to say, this is what's happening. And he said, please, it's 8 p.m., I need to sleep. And I remember the woman calling me all through the night, and we had to go to the local police in that area to say, please, there's a case at NAPTIP, this is what needs to happen. And the police officer said we should go back to NAPTIP. You've reported to NAPTIP, so go to NAPTIP. And there's this rivalry between these agencies, between the NAPTIP and the police. When you take a case to NAPTIP, they tell you to go back to the police. When you go to the police, they tell you to, we've had cases where NAPTIP has said, withdraw the case before we attend to it. We've had cases where the police says, withdraw the case, it's already with NAPTIP now, go to them now. Whereas they're supposed to be connected, they're supposed to figure out how to work together so that survivors do not suffer at the end of the day. So when we say that the VAPP Act is not going to be there anymore and they're saying, oh, repeal the VAPP, it doesn't make any sense to me, because at the end of the day, survivors are at the receiving end of this violence. And as a matter of fact, I dare state that repealing the VAPP is violence against women in itself.
So what do you think is the way forward? Besides us having such conversations, I also see some hashtags online. For some of us, this is the least we can do to make sure this is a national conversation and that people are held accountable and responsible. But for other Nigerians who want to lend their voice to this and help, how can they go about this?
I think the first thing is to keep talking about it. There are numbers of law of your representatives on websites. Please find them, call them, email them, text them, tell them that this is not a good idea. If we have to do anything, we can amend. And yes, we're not saying that there's nothing to amend about the VAPP. There are lots of things that needs to be amended. So the conversation can be, let us amend the VAPP Act and seek opinions of civil societies that work around these issues. As a matter of fact, I've read that bill, and even yesterday while I was going through it, I had to keep the two acts, 2015 and this current one, and I was like, hold on, this doesn't make any sense, and this doesn't make any sense. And so one of the things that we need to do is when you see people talking about these issues, if you cannot tweet about it or talk about it, repost, retweet, share. but most importantly, it is our duty as citizens. We have the highest power to hold our representatives accountable, and let us do that.
That I'll let you have the closing comments.
Like I said earlier, kudos to Nigerians who are already championing this movement. And as Pere also said, we cannot afford to not lend our voices at this point. It is very critical, and Nigerians have been asking very critical questions. They've asked that, what is the track record of the senator that is even pushing for this bill regarding human rights or gender equality in general? What has it done in the past? What has it done for the people in the states regarding this? How does this look for us in the international human rights setting? What does this say to victims? Are we enabling perpetrators now? So all in all, like Pere also said, I'll just build on that let's lend our voice in the little ways that we can. There's the hashtag protect the VAPP, there's the hashtag amend not repeal, there's the hashtag save the VAPA across social media. Putting this information out there, making sure we are in line with this information, educating ourselves as well, creating awareness in the little way we can, just to make sure that these conversations keep going. So that's the least we can do for now. Well, at least they'll know that we are not keeping quiet, we are seeing it and we don't want it. At best, we want an amendment, not a repeal. And they have to align with us, because this is a human rights struggle and we are not about to get a regression in human rights in 2024. That makes no sense. So all in all, let's just keep at it. Let's keep talking about it. Let's make sure that we do our best with the little we can. The little now is our voice, and we just have to keep putting it out there. Thank you.
Amidat Abdul Salam, dear Pierre Ibim, and Hassan Amina. It's a pleasure having this conversation with you. Don't stop fighting, don't stop speaking out. It's the least you can do, and hopefully your reward is in heaven, because this is quite a thankless job, and the struggle continues literally. But thank you so much for the privilege of sharing your opinions with us on this show, and I hope Nigerians out there have learned. When we talk about the Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act, it's meant to protect the people. We know how long it takes for laws to be passed before it gets signed, and this is the danger. Do we now leave a vacuum in the system because we are waiting for something to be signed while people are being abused, people are being killed, and some people are also going to suffer constant trauma and the threat to life as a result of this. And so we should be protecting the people. And also, like the Minister of Women Affairs, if people are hungry, is this the priority right now to get rid of something which is at least working in a little way? But that's all we can take on the lifestyle segment. We'll continue to observe this story and see how it develops. We'll take a quick break. When we return, we have Abraham with the sports update. Don't go away.